Ari Melber, you've had a chance to actually read this. How does it stack up to you?
Well, you mentioned the plane over there in Florida. I think the Attorney General landed this plane. We have to remember how far this process has gone. There was a big fight over getting the material. There was a big fight about going to court. We talked about all the testiness in court. And now you have the results. And these are not by some critic of Donald Trump. These are not some Democratic appointee. This is a judge, as you've emphasized, and we've got great people at the table who've been covering it, that says, you're not really running a business, you're running a con. And in court, you're, quote, denying reality. You're basically coming close to lying or committing perjury. And then you're saying, well, if we lied to everyone and nobody got hurt, what's the real damage? And those defenses, which we heard, were really called out and shredded here. There's all sorts of damage if this becomes regular operating procedure, if people get away with it. Big picture, though, if you get out from all those details, and I did spend time reading through a bunch of it. I didn't fully finish it in full disclosure, but I read most of it. Big picture, this is a blow to Donald Trump's entire identity as this businessman. And I am reminded, and Rev may have thoughts too, Sean Carter famously said, I'm not a businessman. I'm a businessman. Now let me handle my business. Damn. And Donald Trump believes that he is the Trump or business. Well, the business just got rocked by this record-setting level of fraud damages. And he's not going to be allowed to handle his businessman, not at least for 3 years. So that's a lot of consequence, and he is bound up with the business. And so the question isn't politically, oh, well, will his core base care about this? Does it undo his branding? No, his branding is set with them. Yep. But this is a financial and real problem for him as someone who is synonymous with his business at a time where he is, of course, separately out of court asking the public to what? To put him back in power because he's good at politics, he says. He's good at government. He's good at business. Well, again, he's got to deal with the fact that there's outside evidence here now and this ruling that he's more of a con man than a businessman, that he's more of a would-be autocrat than a democratically participating candidate. And so, no, you never know when it's all going to fall apart, but it's definitely another terrible day in court for him.
Thank you for the reminder that spacing and punctuation matters in the intent of a sentence. I want to go back to something that Vaughn was saying and tie it all together, which was this idea that Trump has already blasted out a text message to his supporters, fundraising off of this. That is not a surprise for any of us who follow him. Can those dollars raised, though, go towards any of these penalties?
Yes, and this is an interesting. We've seen in previous cases that his legal fees, some of them are being paid for out of a political action committee, but I got to tell you those dollars are going fast and furious down, and there's very
they have a lot of
left.
directions to go in,
and that's a lot of money that he would have to now raise in order to meet this. He could, if he. There's just so little left that he's going to have to come up with this. But yes, he can. The PAC can raise, the super PAC can't. These are all the rules I'm not overly familiar with, but that's my reporting on that shows that. But there's no way that he is going to be able to come up with that much money from donors. I would follow.
But let's not forget, he's still facing 4 trials that he's got to pay lawyers. That he doesn't know how long the trials are going to last. He does not know what is going to be the consequence there. So he can raise money, whether he can raise $450,000 or $450 million when you combine these, and pay lawyers for 4 different trials. I mean, you're talking about a lot of money. And I don't know that at some point his contributors don't get exhausted in terms of this, because then he's also got to run a campaign.
And even if they don't get exhausted, so many people just have to give so much money in a very short period of time. This is going to all have to pony up soon.
The point I wanted to make on what Ari had made, don't forget also, personally, he's a control freak. Do you know how it will impact him that he has to go and ask someone to write a check? I mean, this will drive him completely nuts. Donald Trump ran his organization. Any of us that ever met with him, pro or con, he ran everything. He signed the checks. Everything is named after him. He now has to go and say, I want to get this, but I have to ask somebody. I want to cut this deal. Oh, let me get the monitor on the phone. He is a broken person psychologically, because now he cannot make any decisions without permission. And he's never had that in his life.
So we've talked about all of the looming cases. You also reminded me that there's a looming IRS audit.
That's right. We don't talk about it very often, but we've reported on this audit that he is under, and it's been going on for years. It's going on behind closed doors at the IRS. We don't have a lot of visibility into it. We have no reason to believe it hasn't. It has been resolved, but if this audit goes against him, it's really serious, and it could cost him in excess of $100 million. And I also want to say we know about that. There's other things that we just may not know about that could potentially be draining his cash.
Obviously, the focus, Ari, is on Donald Trump himself at the core of his business. There were also penalties applied to his two oldest sons, the only family member to whom non-family member to whom penalties were applied. Weisselberg, what did you make of all of those additional penalties?
Well, you know, they go through there and they talk about, again, this was a civil trial, but the judge is very clear that Eric Trump was not truthful, and that's sort of dragged out of him. And again, sometimes I was saying to you in the break, so if I said in the break, I can say it on air, that sometimes we tell people, go read the whole Supreme Court decision. I don't expect everyone without legal training or with a journalistic interest to read this very dense thing. But if you could control F, as we say, for the different names, and you can look at in just the Donald Trump section or just the Eric Trump section, those are just a couple pages. You can read that section and find out that, yeah, those people that you're asking about followed the pattern and practice of basically misleading or lying in how they did business, and then when called on it, misleading or lying, and then when confronted with it, you know, Eric and others say, oh, well, I guess that's the case, or I guess I dealt with it, or I guess I misled about it. And so what you get from this is that the pattern and practice, that the con is not the exception to the rule, an overstatement or overexcitement. Anyone dealing with New York real estate, which might be everyone at this table, but definitely you and I, knows that you get realtors saying this and that, you know. This is way beyond that, and you get the sense that this is the pattern and practice. And the CFO was willing to do jail time at Rikers rather than fully cooperate. You can get out all the analysis of why that is, but Weisselberg, who you mentioned, people forget all the different characters. Cohen, who's going to come up and speak on this, who did time for election-related crimes and other things. And then you have Donald Trump going on trial in New York next month. You know, if it feels like the heat is going up because of all these different people and some of them at various levels getting caught, it is. Now, I can't tell you what that means a jury does. We'll cover and respect the rule of law, whatever a jury decides. But for those around the country who say, I'm a little tired, I've heard it before, when's it going to end? Well, it begins next month because there's actually going to be a criminal trial. And all this stuff takes a long time because most people don't operate the way he does. They don't get caught conning this bad. And if they do, in my experience in civil cases, they usually try to cut a deal. Right. He took this all the way to the end, and whatever you think about it, by taking it to the end and fighting this hard, he hurt himself, he played himself. He's probably paying out far more money than had he reached a deal.
He wasn't able to delay it to the point of oblivion. Yes.
Can I say something about that? I mean, Ari's point about the con is a really good one because many people who engage in such a con also find contrition. And so there's a part at the end of the decision where Judge Engoron is talking about Donald Trump being no Bernie Madoff. And that's not an accidental aside. That was an issue that came up at closing arguments. He asked the lead lawyer for the Attorney General's office, how would you compare this scheme to the Madoff scheme? And he paused for a second and he thought about it. And he said, you know, the scope was so much smaller here. But in terms of the pervasiveness of it, the continuation of it, the commitment to the bit, so to speak, they're not all that different, right? And what Judge Engoron is noting is, yes, he's no Bernie Madoff in terms of the scale, but there was never any contrition. And Madoff, when he pled guilty, had a very extensive and long mea culpa. Now, you might be cynical about his reasons for doing so, but he said he was sorry, that it had ruined his entire life. We will never hear anything like that from Donald J. Trump.
If it makes you feel any better, I have already put evac on alert. He's ready to go if it comes to that. General, I can assure you.
Hey, General, let me into the war room to see you, so I had to hack my way onto this frequency.
This better be critical, Wheelie.
Sir, come on, when is it not, please? Okay, couple of things. I'm running low on the dough. I was thinking about taking a couple of months sick leave, maybe starting today. And, oh yeah. I intercepted a transmission from Megatron.
Then send it through.
Yes, sir, right away, sir. And so I'll assume that we're going on the other stuff.
This is your last warning, insects. Relinquish what remains of the Allspark.
So who's the insect? You? What? Who's the insect?
Protect you. They were defeated on our world, and we will defeat them here.
And this was just a diversion. Security, please bring him up. Ravage, he's already inside. Deeds! Give me an update on that reserve. Boss readiness. What was his name?
Evac, sir.
Right, evac.
She's right in front.
We are facing a heavy sustained attack. They appear to be after the All-Star aircraft. General, watch out! General! Need this evac immediately, General. Evac immediately.